Hello everybody, welcome to week 8. If you have made it this far, my gosh, you are doing so well because that means that you're the halfway point, so congratulations to you. I'm going to talk today about the paper 3 assignment sheet, and I'm going to introduce that to you as well. I'm going to take just a moment to discuss that piece that I asked you to read, Structuring Successful Argument Papers Through the Toulmin Method of Argumentation, because it's important. And then I'll just sort of quickly go through some of the assignments for this week in addition to the ones I'm going to focus on and what's coming up for next week. So if you want to look with me at that paper 3 assignment sheet, you can pull it up by going to Content up at the top of our page, and then in the left-hand toolbar, Major Paper Assignments and Related Materials, and click on Paper 3. So as you'll see, this is a cause and effect persuasive essay. And so if you're writing something that's persuasive, then obviously your goal is to persuade your reader that you are correct about a certain idea or a certain claim that you're making. And if you're writing a cause and effect persuasive essay, then your goal is to say, you know what, here's the cause of this issue or this problem or whatever it might be, and here are the resulting effects of it. So that's sort of breaking down cause and effect persuasive essay. And in this particular assignment, I want you to discuss the causes and effects of a topic or an issue or an event or an experience that is somehow related to our study of the other. So those people whom, for whatever reason, we might perceive as being very different from ourselves, that idea of the other. And so on the second page of this document, I list some possible topics. Sometimes I have students who will come up with a topic that is really interesting, and they'll run it past me and they'll say, Professor, may I sort of do this instead of what's on the sheet? And if I feel that it's something that will work and it's something you're interested in, and it's within the parameters of the assignment, then I'll almost always say yes, because if a topic is really interesting to you, then it's easier for you to write about. So here are how the important dates for paper 3 are going to play out. In week 10, that's beginning Monday, October 26th, the first thing you'll do is upload your idea worksheet for paper 3. And so to upload it, you'll click on the Assignments tab, you'll look for Idea Worksheet for Paper 3, you'll follow the instructions there. And as always, that's sort of step 1 in our writing process. Because part of what we're here to learn is that writing is a process, right? And so the Idea Worksheet just helps you to sort of begin to crystallize your thoughts. It doesn't mean you're locked in firmly. You certainly can change your mind. The second thing you want to do is submit your pre-writing day materials. So we're not having a peer review day this time around. We're having what I call a pre-writing day. And you want to submit those materials before 11:59 p.m. on Sunday, the 1st of November. And so after you've completed step 1 and you've done that idea worksheet, you want to submit an introductory paragraph. So that's the first part of the pre-writing day materials with a thesis statement at the end. So you're submitting your intro. You also want to submit a brief outline of your paper. So it doesn't have to be a long, complicated outline. It doesn't have to be anything super fancy. Just a general kind of outline. So you might have your intro with your thesis, and then after that, first body paragraph. And then you might tell me what you plan to write briefly about in that paragraph. Second body paragraph, and so on. And your essay has to contain 2 sources. So in this pre-writing materials that you'll submit at least 3 possible sources for me to evaluate. And make sure you're on track there with the kinds of sources that you are considering. They're reliable. They're going to work for this paper. And so that way, you know, if one of them maybe is a bit off, you have two others. So those are the actual materials you'll submit for the pre-writing day. And remember that this pre-writing will count just like a peer review day, in that 10 points are docked from that paper 3 grade if you don't submit those materials before 11:59 on Sunday, the 1st of November. And then on Monday, the 9th of November, that's when the final draft of paper 3 will be due, before 11:59 p.m. And as always, you click on assignments to upload your paper. You look for paper 3 final draft. And remember the policy about major papers. 10 points are deducted from your paper grade for every calendar day that paper is late, including the day that it's due and weekends. And I don't accept them after 5 days. So here are the specifics for paper 3. This paper should be at least 2.5 pages long. If you go over that, that's fine. But if you're under that, you're going to get points deducted. And obviously typed, double-spaced, Times New Roman, 12-point font, standard margins. That is standard for a college-level paper. And for this assignment, you must quote and you must cite in MLA formatting at least 2 sources in your paper. So you have to cite them in the body of your paper and also on a separate works cited sheet at the end of your paper. And so here's the rhetorical situation, sort of the whole enchilada, as it were, right? Remember that word rhetoric equals effective communication? So here's the situation for how you're going to communicate effectively. As a college student, you've been asked to write a cause and effect essay. It has to conform to a formal academic structure. So you've got your introductory paragraph with your thesis as the very last sentence of that paragraph, your supporting body paragraphs, and your formal conclusion. Your audience consists of me and your classmates. So imagine that we have some limited knowledge of this topic, but we might need a bit of a refresher. So you will be writing to persuade your audience of the cause and effect of a particular topic or issue or event. But again, you do not use the words I or me or you or your in your paper at all, unless they're part of a quote that you're using. You would use one or ones instead, or you would just restructure that sentence to get out of the I or the you. So the objective of this paper is to persuade your reader fairly and effectively as to the causes and effects of a particular topic or idea or event or experience. So you're thinking, okay, what caused this issue, this problem, or this event? What were its effects on people, on society at the time? And how do the causes and effects of this topic or event or issue or whatever it is create an us versus them sort of mentality, leading to that concept of the other, right? So here are the questions you want to be thinking about as you're writing. Have I chosen a title that reflects my topic in an informative way and in a fairly creative way? With a college paper, you can't always just be super duper creative with titles, but you want to find a title that is interesting and that works. Do I have an interesting hook in place for my opening sentence? Have I clearly explained the subject matter of my paper in my first paragraph? If we get to the end of paragraph 1 and we really have no idea what this paper is about, then Houston, we have a problem, right? Do I have a thesis statement? And you're going to be pre-writing that for pre-writing day that states my main idea clearly. Is it located at the end of paragraph 1? Have I pre-written at least 3 main points? That's part of the pre-writing day materials that outline and support my ideas for pre-writing day mentioned above. So in that outline, you need at least 3 main points. Have I written a paragraph about each point in my paper? Does each paragraph begin with a clear topic sentence? So again, sort of like a link in a chain, a connector. That topic sentence might say something about what you just said in the previous paragraph. It definitely is going to lead your reader into this new paragraph. Have I located at least 2 credible sources and cleared my sources with my professor on pre-writing day? Because I'll give you feedback when you submit those pre-writing day materials. Have I quoted from each source at least twice and cited the quotes, all of them correctly, in MLA citations? So at the end of the quote, We need a parenthesis, the writer's last name, the page number, the end parenthesis, period, right? Have I written a concluding paragraph that sums up my ideas without repeating my thesis word for word? Don't repeat anything word for word again in your paper. It's very boring to your reader. Find a new way to say this at the end, right? Do I have a works cited page? So at the end of your paper on a separate page, you need that works cited page that says works cited in the middle at the top. And then you have the full listing of every source you used in your paper in the works cited page. And have I proofread, spell checked, and grammar checked my paper? So remember, it's going to be important to persuade fairly, so you want to use ethos, and well. You want to support your stance with reliable evidence, and you want to use qualifiers, and we're going to talk about that when we get to the Toulmin method, to prevent your opponent, someone who might disagree, from poking holes in your argument. So here are some possible topic choices that I give you that relate to some of the readings that we're going to be doing. So what are the causes of our obsession with consumerism and the possession of trendy material things like cars and fancy clothes and certain brands of shoes and that sort of thing in American society? What are the effects of that on Americans and the rest of the world? Maybe for good, maybe for ill, depending on your opinion. Does that mentality at all cause an us versus them mindset? And you could take either position there. Here's another one. What are the causes of racism? What are its effects on society? How does racism create an us versus them mentality? How does racism cause this idea of the other? Now, obviously, this is a very broad topic that goes back a long way in history, sadly. And so that's a broad topic. You probably are going to want to choose something within that broad topic that is a little bit more narrow and more specific because it's not a real long paper. Here's another one. What are the causes of the Salem witch trials? There's an event, right? And we're reading about it. What were the effects of this event? How did this historical event create this in-group, out-group, us versus them kind of mentality? And again, note, you can choose a topic, an issue, or an event not listed here if it is relating to our study of the other in some way. And there are so many ideas that would relate. So here's an example of an argumentative thesis statement for the above topics. In researching the ever-increasing tendency to obsess over material items in American society, it seems clear that the causes of this phenomenon are as follows. Americans are bombarded with images and messages in the media, on television, in film, and in print, that place value on things above human relationships. The effects of this situation lead to acts of social injustice, a lack of moral principles, and a society that rewards its members for their ability to possess objects, not for their compassion or kindness. And the sources that this writer used would be the Black Friday, Consumerism Minus Civilization, one of our readings, the Nasarima and or the Mysterious Fall of the Nasarima, which is another piece about the Nasarima. And so to support that kind of thesis, obviously you need to offer examples of the ways in which you feel that Americans are bombarded with these images and messages that place value on objects, on things. You would want to use quotes and paraphrases from your sources to establish those ideas. You would need to offer examples of the resulting effects. So for example, how are those who are maybe poor, who have few or no material possessions, treated in our society? How does a mindset that feeds on acquiring more things become self-absorbed and less concerned with others? And I won't bore you by reading through the other two examples, but you can certainly read them on your own. And as always, you see at the bottom of the page a listing of the TBR student learning outcomes that this paper is evaluating. So that is the paper 3 assignment sheet. And now I want to talk quickly about structuring successful argument papers through the Toolman method. And you'll find that document by going to content and then to course documents and then looking for structuring successful arguments. So there was a guy named Stephen Toulmin, and he was a very famous British philosopher but he developed a lot of important ideas about shaping and understanding argument in a book that he wrote, The Uses of Argument. And when I taught at UTK for a long time, we taught this to our students, and it really helps you when you're trying to write argumentative papers. So Toolman said, you know what? All arguments begin with a thesis statement or a claim. And that's a debatable statement. It's never a question, it's a statement or an assertion that you hope to prove. And it can be demonstrated using logic, logos, right? Evidence. And so it answers that question, so what? What's the point of this paper? Toolman says, guess what? There has to be a logical, persuasive connection between your thesis and the reasons, the data, the evidence that supports it. And he calls that connection the warrant. So the warrant answers the question, how exactly do I get from my thesis over here to my evidence and have it make sense to my reader? And the warrant is the assumption, the logical assumption that makes your thesis seem plausible to your reader. So here's an example of putting that into action. Here's a thesis. There are many folk traditions concerning the defining features of poisonous mushrooms. However, there are no general identifiers that apply to all poisonous mushrooms. Therefore, such traditions are unreliable guides, and the use of folk traditions to try to identify edible mushrooms causes mushroom poisoning. So the thesis, the claim is, hey, if you just rely on these myths and these old wives' tales about which mushrooms are okay to eat and which ones will kill you, you may be dead soon. So it isn't a good idea. Well, that thesis needs a logical, persuasive connection to the evidence now that's going to support it. And that connection is the warrant. So since we all know that if you eat something that's poisonous, it's dangerous and you could die, therefore, it might not be very smart to rely on some folk tradition or remedy, some old wives' tale, to determine which mushrooms are the ones you want to avoid. So that seems logical to us, right? That's a logical assumption. That's the warrant in this case. Now, let's take that and use it again in another example. So here's a thesis. Elderly drivers suffer from deteriorating conditions that affect their eyesight, eye-hand coordination, and reflex use. Therefore, there should be a cutoff age for all older drivers in the U.S. So the warrant is that since we all know that when we become elderly, our bodies deteriorate, that's logical, right? Therefore, it might be unwise for some of these elderly people in that condition to be driving. So again, it's a logical assumption that we all can understand. That's the warrant. So Toolman says, you know what? Entering an argument is like walking into a conversation that's already in progress. So you've got to figure out the background of the history of this topic, this event, this experience, this issue that you're writing about. You've got to do some research. You've got to have an understanding of the audience you're addressing. Who are these people? What do they think? How can I best reach them? You've got to think ahead to the possible oppositional arguments that are going to be raised in opposition to what you're saying, and the way in which those kinds of arguments should be properly and respectfully and effectively addressed and refuted. You got to think ahead to all those things. So Toolman says, you know what? The best way to manage all of this is with what he called qualifiers. Qualifying words or phrases that place limits on our thesis statements or claims. And they play an essential role in creating an effective argument because through them we limit our responsibilities in the argument. So let me give you an example here. I'm going to give you a completely unqualified claim. No qualifying words are in it at all. People who don't go to college earn less money than people who do. No qualifications in that at all. It is not qualified. Well, what would you say if you were going to oppose that argument? What are some of the first ideas you would come up with? You'd say, no, wait just a minute here. What about all of these people who are gazillionaires who never went to college? What about them? What about people who maybe didn't even graduate from high school and now they're just bazillionaires? Sorry, but your claim doesn't make sense, right? You could easily knock down my argument. But if I add a simple qualifier phrase, I make my argument a lot more reasonable and a lot more difficult for anyone to shoot it down. In most cases, there's my qualifier, in most cases, people who don't go to college earn less than people who do, right? So just the addition of those little words, in most cases, or much of the time, often, frequently, qualifying words like that. And I give you more examples from the piece about older drivers. Experts agree that. That's kind of a qualifying claim. I'm taking my responsibility out of it. I'm saying, hey, it isn't just me, folks. These experts agree, right? And it seems clear that is arguably a frequent cause of. So I limit my responsibilities and I make it more difficult for my opponents to knock my arguments down. The goal is to create a thesis, an argument that uses good old-fashioned psychology to reach the audience. So you want to express your views in a way that causes your reader to respond as favorably as possible to your ideas in college and in life. Very important. I use these techniques on my husband, and I can just get him so frustrated. He just wants to just go scream or something. You know, he's like, dadgummit, you know. So it works in life just as it will work in your papers. So remember, you only have 2.5 pages to persuade someone. And some of your readers are going to be adamantly opposed, especially if you're writing about a super controversial topic like abortion or gun control. Some of them are going to be absolutely opposed to your position from the get-go. So don't alienate them further by offending them or by expressing only an opinion rather than relying on research and expert backing, or by using language that feels narrow-minded. You want to use those qualifiers to soften the blow. And then I give you the Toolman outline, the thesis, qualifiers, the warrant, the evidence. That might consist of statistics, data, books or journal articles on the subject, quotes, paraphrases from accounts of individuals involved in a traffic accident caused by an elderly driver, if you were writing about that subject. Authority, as they say on South Park. You want to cite the experts, conditions of rebuttal, and response. So you've got to be thinking ahead to what are people going to say back to me when I'm making my argument. And then at the end, I give you a list of qualifying words that you can use in your writing. So that's very important to remember. And in this week's discussion board, we have 3 topics. First, considering the NASAREMA. Secondly, your thoughts on Leonard's ideas, so that Black Friday piece about the day after Thanksgiving. And then the third one is using qualifiers. So you'll get to actually put some of these ideas into practice. And so the 2 readings that we're looking at are Body Ritual Among the NASAREMA by Dr. Horace Minor. Very interesting. Yeah, let's see what you think about that. Yeah. And then Black Friday, Consumerism Minus Civilization by Andrew Leonard, which is, as I said, about the day after Thanksgiving, the biggest shopping day of the year. Looking ahead to next week, we have Black Men and Public Space by Brent Staples, a very well-known African-American writer, journalist, and scholar. And he's talking about what it's like to be young and black and male just walking down the street. And then The Witches of Salem Village in honor of Halloween coming up, right, by Kai Erickson. And this is an actual historical account of the real Salem witch trials. And then I have some really cool short films that I'd like for you to watch next week. They're all very short, but they're really interesting. We have a discussion board for next week, and again, quiz 3 coming up on MLA. So thank you so much for your patience. I hope you have a great, great week. And any questions, let me know. I will see you soon.